Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming out despite the messy weather outside. Just a reminder before we start to please put your cell phones away and have them on silent so there's no disruptiveness. And same thing goes for laptops, please. So the panel's going to be Q&A style, and once we've gone through our list of questions, then we'll take some from the audience if there's any time left. And before we get started with the questions, I'm going to briefly introduce everybody up here. We have Kevin Landry, who is an associate at Stewart McKelvey. We have Michelle Doucette from Michelle Doucette Photography, Ian Bezanson, President and CEO at Bits Creative Agency, and Angus Campbell, co-founder at The Good Robot. So to start off, I would like everybody to please briefly describe the organization you work for and your position. No particular order, anyone can go first if they want.
I work for Stewart McKelvey. We are a, full-service law firm in Halifax. We operate with a lot of institutional clients, very big corporations that you all would have known and heard of and interacted with. We mostly do corporate, commercial, mergers, acquisitions, that kind of business law that you'd see in cool shows like Suits.
So my business is Michelle Doucette Photography, and what I do is I mostly work with local businesses to tell their branding story. So that could be headshots, events, location, that kind of stuff. But a big part of what I do is working with local restaurants and food companies and doing a lot of food photography.
I run a company called Bits Creative in Halifax. So we're a marketing agency, and we focus on branding, websites, online strategy, offline strategy, kind of doing everything, running the gamut from kind of full-blown advertising to building websites to trying to draw people to websites.
My name's Angus Campbell. I'm one of the co-owners of Good Robot Brewing Company. As you can guess, we brew beer. And that's pretty much it.
How has your career evolved? Are you doing what you've planned to do?
My career has evolved substantially, and I'm certainly not doing what I thought I would be doing. Currently, I work with, my main areas of practice are securities work, which is, things like IPOs and launching small businesses, taking them public. And as well, I work pretty extensively with Canada's new cannabis industry. So I did not think that that was going to be an opportunity that would be available. And I guess before I was a lawyer, I also had 2 small businesses. I did that for a while, and then I decided to do law as well. I guess my backup plan. And it really has not panned out the way I thought it would, and I'm doing work in a very different field than I thought I would have.
So I always knew I was going to have a creative career. I didn't know exactly what that was going to look like in the beginning. I studied photography and did a fine arts degree first. And then I ended up doing graphic design because I thought that was something where I could get a job straight out of school, which I did, and I didn't love it. So I started my own business as a graphic designer and gradually moved back to photography, which was my first love and what I'm most passionate about, and now that's 100% of what I do.
I started with a computer science background and worked for a large corporate technology company building telephone systems. Thought I would love that, did it for a couple of years and hated that, and did a pretty big switch at the time to really focused on building websites for a marketing agency. Figured that was going to be my career, and then some point down the line had an opportunity to kind of jump off on my own and start my own business, and ran with that, and over the years since, I've grown a team and really gone from what I used to do, being curled down in my basement behind my computer, really seeing no one, to really managing a team and running sales for my company, running kind of high-level strategic for the company and for our different clients.
My career changed substantially. I started after I graduated as a chemical engineer. Went and worked in the oil and gas industry in Calgary. Managed a lot of multi-million dollar to multi-billion dollar projects, and there was a moment where I just saw the end of my career in terms of, I guess I knew where I was destined to be in the company and knew where I was destined to be in that industry, and just realized that my heart wasn't there, and not only the industry, but also that lifestyle, or that level of predictability. And anyway, so that was kind of what sent me on my way into entrepreneurship, more or less. But I was a professional engineer at one point, and now a small business owner. So,
What do you like about your work, and what do you dislike about it?
My favorite part about work, I guess, I don't know, I always say law firms are a bit like a mountain range. To some extent, it is a bit like a business, but each person has their practice within that is totally their own. That's part of the reason why it appealed to me. I like to do my own thing, have my own clients, but still you are part of the larger umbrella. So you have a group of colleagues, partners that would, support you, and each of them have different interests than me. So it's I don't know, I call it entrepreneurship light, I guess, because I do have my own practice going on. Then again, there are firm clients that span through a lot of the lawyers at the firm. So in some ways I'm doing my own thing. In other ways I have people to rely on, and really it just gives me a lot of freedom to pursue clients I want in industries I'm interested in, and talk to a lot of very interesting people like these guys who are starting businesses and just doing really awesome stuff.
The favorite part about running my own business, what I really, really love is collaborating with other people, and I get to do that a lot. So it's always somebody different. It might be, a chef that runs a restaurant in Alberta that I get to go visit and connect with them and learn about what they do. I love learning about what people are passionate about. So whatever that might be, their own business, I just find that really interesting. The part I struggle with a little bit is probably the work-life balance. I love what I do, and I'm pretty driven, so I'm just doing it all the time, and I forget to take a break and take care of myself sometimes. So being an entrepreneur can be a little tricky, having that balance sometimes.
What I don't like is probably the quick answer. I don't like chasing money, so I don't like trying to get people to pay their bills. But what I definitely really like about what I do, what my team does, is the variety of different types of work that we get to approach. I mean, with every client we take on, there's something different, and I would say that probably speaks the same for most of the people here. There's always something different and new that you're looking at, and you've got to do a lot of research. You've got to do spend a lot of time to understand someone else's business, and to understand what it is that makes it tick, what makes it special, what their unique problems are, and try to find creative and smart ways to solve those problems and to help them achieve those goals. That's probably the passionate end of what I'm most excited about, but the money part sucks.
So the question was exactly things you like and don't like about entrepreneurship. So for us, one thing that was a bit of a surprise for my company and myself personally was where we have a retail-based company, we've got kind of a big exposure zone to the public, and what that offers is this opportunity to have a voice that gets to speak in particular tones, whether that's supporting charities and giving that charity a broader voice or a broader group of people. So things like that, or being able to I guess value add to groups that may not necessarily have the exposure that they could or should, was one thing that was just totally surprised me. I thought it was just going to be selling beer day to day, but it's a lot more than that, and business can be a lot more than just selling a product. So that was one thing that kind of caught us all off guard, and I really love about entrepreneurship. Some of the harder things for me with entrepreneurship would probably be the amount of education and teaching that you're going through with new employees, and trying to manage and manage your day-to-day while teaching people and communicating well with people, your expectations, and then it's never ending, and more often than not, they're, like, at least in our company, they're younger employees, and we went from having 4 to 26 in a couple months. So that was probably our hardest challenge, or my hardest challenge.
Can you tell us about the types of jobs that might be available for students considering a career with your company? So this could include new grads, summer or part-time positions, or co-op opportunities.
Once again, I'd say pretty extensive. It's like we're the largest firm in Atlantic Canada, probably largest east of Montreal, I'd say. There's everything administrative you can imagine. You know, there's accounts managers, there's tons of legal assistant work, paralegal work. There's, if you've gone to law school, of course, then there's opportunities to be a lawyer there. There's everything in business development, everything in, you know, it has all of the trappings of a larger business that, you know, we hire students frequently. We are always looking for great talent, and I do encourage you all, send out some resumes if that kind of industry excites you. I think we'd be real happy to hear from you.
In my business, I'm a one-person team, so I'm doing it all by myself. All the administration, all the marketing, all the social media, all the actual work, all of that stuff, and it can be really overwhelming when things get busy. So I would love to have help with marketing and social media, and I think it's what, like, younger generations are really, really good at. So that's something I've been thinking about a lot lately, is just to get some help with posting consistently, sharing all the stories, that I'm photographing all these amazing stories, and I have wonderful content, but I just don't have time to get it out there to share it with other people. So that's probably what I would need help with the most.
I mean, I think probably similarly to the StuMac, but on a smaller level. I mean, we kind of have everything running the gamut. We're hiring, we typically are looking for web developers, we're looking for digital strategists, we're looking for account managers, we're looking for business development officers, we're looking for writers, we're looking for PR people. I mean, it's pretty, it runs the gamut pretty wide, and I think typically for us, we still run a pretty small team. I mean, we're under 10 people, so usually when we look to bring someone in at any level, whether it's an internship through to a full-time gig, we're looking for not only are what you coming in for on paper, but what are you passionate about doing down the road? What really gets you excited? Because ultimately we want anyone that comes into our team to be in a position where they can grow, where they can bring more to the team, where the team can bring more to them, where we can sort of, I think as a group, do more together. So, yeah.
Just kind of following on that last point, that's one big portion of our hiring, as well as kind of discussing people's interests as well as the job that they're applying for, because more often than not, we've found the company eventually has a need for somebody's interests. And when you lean on something that somebody's interested in as part of their job, the output is phenomenal. But anyway, in terms of availability, we've always got spots that we're looking to fill, more or less. It's rarely a full-time position in our business, but part-time for anything from, if you're interested in writing scripts, we do a lot of videography, any photography, sales, marketing, and all of that can kind of start with bartending or serving, which we've also got a tap room on site. And a lot of our people that are in the hospitality side of the business often do a lot of those other things, inclusive of writing scripts or whatever. So,
what was your motivation for starting your business, and why did you choose to start the business you did?
I guess background, I did have those 2 small businesses before I did the whole lawyer thing. Motivation there was because I wanted to be able to travel. I guess I had one small business where I was creating document databases and scanning documents, mostly for doctors. It was a great business, and to, to a large extent, I hired some people to do it, and then I went hitchhiking for a few years, which was terrific. Then I had a digital magazine, didn't do so hot, but once again, it gave me the opportunity to travel, something I encourage you all to do, get out of town for a while, do some things you wouldn't normally do. Then the lawyer thing, well, I always kind of thought it had the entrepreneurial elements I was looking for, and I was looking for kind of exposure to a bigger array of basically entrepreneurs here that I could interact with, that I could work with. Basically, I like to see people who contribute to the city just being a great place, and I think this is a great way to help them do those things. Now I have knowledge they need, skills they need, and it's very easy, for me at least, to lend a hand, I guess.
I moved into starting my own company after an experience working for an advertising agency that I didn't love. I found out pretty quickly that that environment wasn't going to be for me. I really wanted to work for myself and have some freedom and flexibility. I'm really happy to work hard, and I want those extra hours to benefit my own business. So that's kind of what drove me. It's not for every personality, but it was definitely for me. And once I get into it, I knew I would never look back. So yeah, I just kind of dove in and figured it out as I went along, which sometimes that comes out of necessity.
Not dissimilar to Michelle, I was working for another advertising agency. At the time, I was doing a lot of freelance work on the side for other clients. Had a few clients in New York who I was doing a fair amount of work for, and was putting in probably 80-hour weeks for the company that I was at, and was hit a stage where I asked for a raise and was told that my predecessor had priced himself out of a job, and I was in my sort of mid-late 20s and said, okay, well, I think this isn't going to be the career path for me within this organization. So I took a bit of a calculated leap and reached back out to mainly the group in New York I was doing work with, and they said, look, we'll come on as your first client. So I started working in my basement with my dog all day, and sort of built it up from there. But yeah, it was a little bit by accident, but a little calculated at the same time.
The short story of how our company got started is Doug, Josh, and I, 3 owners, we were best friends, still are. They always tell you never get into business with your friends. I totally disagree with that. But we went to university together, lived together, went our separate ways, worked in wildly different fields for 5 years, and I had kind of recognized the ceiling that I was going to find myself in the oil and gas industry, which was fine, it just wasn't for me, and decided that I had to do something else. I wasn't interested in the blood, sweat, and tears for a bunch of shareholders, and I wasn't one of them, so the salary meant very little to me, and it was good to pay off my student loans, but outside of that, everything got very soulless. Anyway, so having those conversations with my 2 business partners now, and best friends, we just decided that we were all going to hang it up. They felt the same way about the industries that they were in, and we decided that we were going into entrepreneurship before we knew what we were going into business doing. So we did play the long game on planning, and we stayed at our jobs for 3 years and planned together weekly on Google Hangouts after work was over, and for 3 years we planned the brewery, and we settled on brewing because it really fit our lifestyles. We brewed together in university, we brewed decent beer in university, so we thought on a macro scale we could probably do just as well, and anyway, that's more or less the short story.
What are the advantages and or disadvantages as you see them to being an entrepreneur?
I always found disadvantage number 1 is no steady paycheck. That was definitely the biggest challenge I found. The advantages are numerous. I particularly appreciate being able to, I guess, pursue things that I'm interested in. I guess I'm probably the only lawyer in the Maritimes right now who has kind of a focus on the cannabis industry. It's new, it's exciting to me, but not necessarily to everyone. Same thing with things like cryptocurrency and things of that nature. I find them very exciting, but not every lawyer does. And you know, in a lot of other fields, I wouldn't just be able to keep doing the work, keep my job, and focus only on the stuff I want to do. So it provides you with a lot of flexibility in that way.
I would have to agree. The instability of the income in the beginning is something that can be difficult to deal with. Every year is different. The kind of work that brought me a lot of money the year before may have changed the next year, and you just have to be able to kind of prepare for that. It does start to even out after a while, and you kind of get to know your industry and where your money's coming from and how to organize a little bit better. Mostly lots of advantages. I love having control. I love having control of my own schedule and the jobs that I take on and the kind of work that I do, and connecting with other people. Just having that freedom and flexibility is the most important thing for me, so it outweighs the the financial insecurity sometimes.
I think similarly, I think the advantages for me is you get the almost choose your own adventure role in life, where you can really dictate what it is that you do, that your organization's doing. I think the impact that we see with our clients, and I think more specifically, maybe speaking to your point, the impact that we can have on nonprofits, on groups who maybe are a little more marginalized financially or what have you. Giving them a podium to speak from, giving them opportunities to kind of strut their stuff. I mean, that's one area where I think stepping back to that first bit about being able to kind of decide your own path on things. I mean, we can, as business owners, we can make a decision. You know what, we're going to do $50,000 of free work for this person. And at the end of the day, you're the one on the hook for it. You're the one making that decision, responsible for it. I mean, that's probably ties back to the lack of steady paycheck, but I think also it becomes kind of that feel-good factor. And I think as well as you're growing a team and growing people around you, I mean, you're impacting the lives of your staff, the lives of your staff's family. I mean, it's one thing I realized very quickly once I started hiring a team was I wasn't just bringing money in for my family and feeding my kids. I was helping others to bring money in for their families and to feed their kids. And that's, I think, a burden in some ways, but in other ways, I think it's a pretty special thing. Disadvantages, I could go on and on and on. I think at a high level, the couple things. I mean, lack of steady paycheck is a big one. I think maybe the guilt that comes with it, in the sense of that work-life balance piece. So I go on vacation in a week and I'm already stressing out about all the shit I'm not going to get done while I'm on vacation, and the balls that might drop while I'm on vacation, and that's not fair to my family. But on the flip, it's not. Part of me feels guilty that it's not fair to my team that I'm running away for a week in the sun. So I don't know. At a high level, that's probably biggest disadvantages I could do. But I could.
I'm jealous of other people's pensions too.
Oh yeah, yeah.
What's that?
Jealous of pensions. Yeah, that's the thing. I think.
Oh, exactly.
I hear.
Yeah, very jealous of other people's pensions. They look sweet.
Yeah, just kind of following on those points. Comfort in chaos is a term that we toss around a lot. Entrepreneurship is often chaotic, and if you don't, we're learning as we go. We took no management classes, no business classes. We took a lot of chemistry and engineering classes, so we don't know. The first thing, we Googled our entire business plan together, and that's kind of how we continue to run our company. And I think that's a constant challenge, but that's what makes it exciting. So that's a huge advantage. Some of the disadvantages I can think of, because once you're an entrepreneur, you tend to develop a friendship with other entrepreneurs, and you end up having a group of entrepreneurs, and kind of the resounding sentiment is that everybody's lonely because they think they're in it alone, and especially like for a sole proprietor, at least I've got two other cohorts that we kind of pick each other up whenever times are tough, but probably something along those lines, or like we've got a very public profile, and if something that was marketed didn't go through enough scrutiny or something like that, and it's taken the wrong light, you feel terrible and you feel awful, and the whole weight of the world feels like it's attacking you when that was not the intent of the company, and you're the head of it. So that's where the finger's pointed more often than not, and that really hurts, and it's hard to make peace with that, and all you can do is continue to try and do better and better each time. But yeah, it's just those moments of yeah, I guess oversight more than anything, and oversight of something that we're not specialists in. Marketing is a very, very tricky thing. But yeah, that's probably.
What personal and professional qualities or attributes do you think are necessary to be successful in starting your own business?
I'm going to throw out a pretentious lawyer word here, but I think you have to be an autodidact, and that is someone who is able to learn things themselves. I guess, for example, when I went to law school, I worked 3 jobs during that time. I didn't attend class probably for the last 2 years because I found it was more efficient to learn the stuff myself. Don't tell your teachers I said that. But I think that kind of quality is what you need, particularly in law. For example, if one of my clients comes in, I don't know anything about brewing, for example, I would have to learn that. I would have to learn it fast, and I'd have to learn it on their timeline, which is sometimes unreasonable for what has to get done. But if I need to provide advice to people about their business and their industry, I need to know at least an average amount about that industry and that business. So you're not always going to have someone to hold your hand and walk you through it. You have to learn it yourself, and sometimes on a very short timeline, sometimes at all costs. So call all people you know, call random people, figure out what you have to do. So that's probably the most important one in my mind.
I believe I've built a successful business on my relationships with other people. So for me, that's the biggest thing. And I was actually pretty shy when I started. So going to my first networking events was absolutely terrifying. I had no idea what I was doing or how to do it. But gradually, I think business is what got me over being shy. And everything I've learned from making connections with other people. You know, the saying that people remember how you make them feel is a really important one. If I have an average photo shoot with somebody who had like a not great experience with me, if they weren't comfortable or I rushed them, something went wrong, they're going to look at those photos and they're going to hate them. But if somebody came in for a portrait shoot, somebody who's a little bit nervous, doesn't know what to expect, and I really support them through that process, and we have a lot of fun, we laugh a lot. They have a good experience, they look at those photos and they love them. So it's really about taking the time to get to know people, respecting their time. I think somebody in the very beginning said the most important thing is to show up on time and always say thank you, and I think that's gotten me really far in business.
I agree strongly with both of those points. I think the other ones I would throw in there, you need to be willing to try. You need to be willing to try anything. You need to be willing to fail. You need to have a thick skin. So people are going to, I mean, as you mentioned, the heavy is the head. I mean, at the end of the day, everything's going to fall on you, and everything's your fault. You need to be willing to I think, accept that. Yeah, I mean, it's really, it's all about risks. It's all about kind of calculating those risks, knowing when to take those risks. I think the other big one that I've really learned, and I've probably only learned more so over the last couple of years in my business, is you really need to be able to have the mindfulness to remove yourself from a situation and kind of think more strategically big picture about something. So not allow yourself to get into the day-to-day weeds. If there's an issue, I mean, you need to be able to kind of pull back and know what's the real problem here, what's the perspectives being looked at from the table. I mean, a lot of times if something goes wrong, my team may have a mob mentality towards a client, and I need to be able to step back and say, well, from the client's perspective, there's this, this, this. From your perspective, there's this, this, this. From the bigger perspective, we're trying to die on a hill on a very little thing that's part of a big thing that we're all working towards. I mean, having that perspective, I think, and that ability to kind of have some strategic thought added to the equation probably is what keeps our companies afloat, I would say.
I think probably overarching for mine is just the ability or interest or whatever drives you to be able to work hard. But along with that, it really follows your comments. Three things that I find really important, at least in our company now, is the ability to reflect. I practice self-reflection weekly, and what went well and what went poorly, and trying to understand why it went poorly. People make mistakes, but is that mistake indicative of something more major, a major flaw in the system that we've developed within our company? Taking that perspective has seen us through in a lot of challenging times and made people better and made us better and made the company tighter and more cohesive. Second being the ability to focus. The amount of bombardment that we get from marketing and technology and Facebook and Instagram, whatever, it's removed a lot of people's ability to focus and produce quality work in a short period of time. So what we're seeing, so what we try to do is, if you're in our office, you're not allowed on Facebook, Instagram, whatever else, your phone's off, and you're doing tasks that's assigned to you, and some of our employees are banging out in 2 hours what they previously took 2 days to produce, and thanking us for it because their work has gotten better and they've employed that into their own lives. And the third being the ability to daydream, and the importance of that is seeing the bigger picture for yourself. And in my life, that's this company. So taking time to daydream and have no expectations of those daydreams offers kind of a blank canvas for me to daydream as to where the company should go and what would benefit it and what would benefit the people involved in it and the people that we do business with. So I think those three things, reflection, focus, and daydreaming, are really important.
What advice do you have for university students who might be thinking about starting their own business?
That's a tough one, actually. What advice? Do it.
The biggest support system for me was connecting with other people. Again, it's all about people. People that you look up to, people that might have information that you don't have yet. Reach out, ask them to sit down with you for coffee. People are almost always really happy to do that. I'm happy to do that. Most of what I've learned has been from asking other people lots of questions about business, about their personal lives, about photography, about anything you can think of. You can get that information from other people. They can also give you recommendations for courses to look into or networking events that you should be a part of. So I think that's definitely the number one thing for me.
Don't underestimate the power of your network, and I guess further that create a network. So, I mean, the people that you go to school with, form bonds, form friendships with them, and that's going to turn into, it might not turn next year into something, but at some point in your career, these are people that are going to give you opportunities to be able to leverage down the road. I think further to not underestimate that power of the network, don't underestimate the power of your mentors or creating kind of a mentor ship, which kind of then speaks to what you said of reach out to people and go for coffee with people. I mean, we were talking about this when we came in, like having coffee and picking someone's brain, because chances are they've been there before, they've done this before, they've had your exact problem before, and they can give you some advice on what they did and how that worked for them, and it may not be the silver bullet for you, but it certainly will give you some perspective into where to go. I think on top of that, don't underestimate the power of the internet through Google specifically. I mean, if you don't know how to do something, you said earlier again, and I agree with it as well, search it on Google. Chances are there's a business plan online that you can use as a starter that'll give you all sorts of things you haven't thought of, or there's someone's asked the same question online and give it an answer, and again, it might not be the right one, but it gets you started. And I mean, for me, the further thing, it probably speaks against a little bit of what you said, but I'd say don't do it right away. I'd say go work somewhere else, go learn what works, go learn what doesn't, go learn what you like, go learn what you don't like, and use the start of your career, and anyone can disagree with me on this, but in my mind, use the start of your career to get a lot of variety. So work a couple of years in a job or a few years in a job and go get another job or get a better job in that company, and tap in along the way to that network, to those mentors, and learn as much as you possibly can. That will help you immensely as you start your own business. That will give you understanding as to why that jerk that you worked for at the start of your career took an approach, because you might hit a point in your career as a business owner that you're like, oh shit, I remember this, and I remember how I felt at this, but it'll give you some perspective, some feeling on that. Yeah, do that for a couple of years and build that network, and then, I don't know, for me, it made that step into starting my own business that much easier. It wasn't a blind leap of faith, it was more of a calculated risk at the time.
I guess just to expand, my whole point with the do it is just, sorry, the lawyer, right? But my point really is take a step each day, get closer and closer. Inertia is not your friend. It's way easier just to coast and wake up when you're 40 doing something you don't like. And I think, I see value in what you say though. It's, yeah.
Kind of middle of both worlds. I would recommend working for a small business and understanding what it is without having to manage the risk. The risk of failing is so high when it comes to small business. If you can exist in that environment without having that risk, I think that would be the best learning platform. And you can work on whatever business idea you have throughout that period. It was 3 years of working one job and planning for my future, between the three of us planning the brewery, and it was great. And we struggled, and had we not gone through that phase, of course we wouldn't have tried to build a brewery. But I think probably a little bit of A and a little bit of B would be my recommendation. And yeah, just learning what you don't know. So after 3 years of working on a business plan, largely through Google, we got to a point where we didn't know if it was good or bad. We knew the Excel spreadsheet made sense and it looked profitable, but we didn't know if anything was realistic. So what do? You can't really submit it to Google and ask for a green light or a red light. So anyway, we reached out to a government-based agency, and they hooked us up with a consultant, and he went through it. He had 40 years experience and said, this is good, this good, this bad, this bad. You need to research these specific points, fix those, and a month later we had business loans from 3 different banks. So it's try as hard as you can, and when you hit a wall, maybe that's when you need to talk to somebody. But do your own due diligence and talk to people who maybe you don't need to pay a consultant, and you've got an uncle or an uncle's friend or whomever, and save those dollars and get a coffee with that uncle's friend and submit your business plan to them and see if it makes sense. Since opening the brewery almost 3 years ago, I've had those same meetings or coffees or beers with over a dozen young entrepreneurs that just wanted to float their idea by somebody who's kind of been through the trenches, and that's how I see the most probable way or efficient way of going through the process had I planned to do it again. So,
is there any questions from the audience? Well, okay, yeah. Just speak up, speak clear.
That's a really interesting question, because it's something that I didn't do. And to your question, I don't know if you're referring to the company itself or me as an individual, but the oversight being that I didn't have a financial plan for myself. because I was so engulfed by this business that I really didn't give a shit about myself. And now that's starting to play into my life a little bit, which is fine, and I'll figure it out through Google probably. But in terms of the financial plan, it's very simple in terms of this is your income, this is your expenses, and this your overhead, and yada yada yada. And you just need to make it fit your model. Is that kind of the route that your question was heading, or? So that's more of a personal investment strategy? Is that kind of what you're? I don't know, anyone else?
I guess it might depend upon the type of business. Like I've had 3 separate businesses, each with separate overhead and different things. I mean, currently now I'm responsible for a portion of overhead at our office, things like that. So there is more overhead now. So, I mean, if you have extra to put into the business, it does depend on how much your business needs, I guess. First couple of years of any of the businesses I've run, they have been very cash hungry. There wasn't much room for me to take lavish vacations or top up my RRSP or anything like that. But it would depend upon the business. I mean, when I had my digital magazine, overhead was quite low. But still, there were demands of my time where I had to put a significant amount in that. And I don't think there's a magic number, but I would suggest that when you're starting a business, you should expect to be putting almost all your resources into it early, unless you come from substantial means. So.
I'm just going to kind of add to that. I think factors really will play into the equation, and by factors I mean what else is at play. So when I started my business, it was as I sort of joked, it was me in my basement with my dog, but all to say, I had a mortgage to pay, I had an internet connection to pay for, and I bought an Apple computer and a little bit of software. Like there wasn't a lot of upfront, and the mortgage was getting paid. For me personally, financially, when I was working for myself, by myself, my main client paid like clockwork. They paid me very well. My additional clients, I didn't care. Not that I didn't care on the work. I worked my ass off for them. I made sure that they got great work. They got it on time. But if they were late to pay a bill, I didn't care because everything else was paid for, and that was kind of gravy. But when the other factors got put into the equation, so then I started to hire staff. Then I had to get an office. Then I had to buy the staff. Well, before the office, I had to buy staff computers. I had to buy staff chairs. I had to buy desks. I had to buy curtains. I had to buy a phone system. I had to buy. Like, there's all this stuff you've got to buy. And I think really in any of us, you've got, yeah, stir sticks for coffee. But I mean, you've got different factors you need to buy. But I mean, like at that, you've got a coffee machine. You've got like really all sorts of stuff you don't think about. And on top of that, the biggest thing I didn't think about was I went from making I don't know, low 6 figures a year in my late 20s, and everything was good, and there wasn't really much to worry about, to hiring staff, and I didn't take a steady paycheck home for another 3 years after that. I would have 3 months where I would take out, I don't know, $10,000, $20,000 a month, and they were great months, and then I would have 9 months where I took not a penny out. And in fact, in most of those times, I was feeding money into the business. And why that was, part of that is I think maybe blind passion for the business. Part of that was holding on to really good staff during the slow times. But the biggest part of that, and the biggest factor that came into play for me, and probably comes into play for you, is people who are really slow to pay their bills. So if I bill out $100,000 in a month and I know I need $60,000 to pay for everything for that month for my business, if 2 of those clients that are $20,000 a piece decide they don't want to pay their bill that month, I'm screwed. And that's reality of entrepreneurship is at any given point, you can go from making a lot of money to putting a lot of money in, or to making no money, and the timing of it is, I'm really selling entrepreneurship here. But I mean, it's the unknowns of it. But I mean, that creates excitement at the same time. It creates an awful lot of stress, but But it kind of gets back to that piece of like kind of the choosing your own adventure, setting your own tone to things. I mean, I've stopped numerous times over the last 7 or 8 years of doing this and said, okay, I can't do this anymore. This is too stressful. It's too much. But then I stop and think about it's almost like a bad relationship where you look back and say, but what was it like when I worked for someone else? I hated that. I didn't enjoy that. I didn't really get to make any decisions. There was nothing was super impactful. I didn't really, like, my kind of to your thing about shareholders, like, my hard work was going into someone else's pocket, and like, yes, I had a steady paycheck and that was great, but at the end of the day, like, I wasn't kind of choosing my own destiny for things, and decisions weren't kind of falling on my shoulders. But yeah, I don't know if that helps at all. I feel as a rant, but anyway.
Just wanted to touch on shareholders for a second. Even though I was making fun of them earlier, our company actually has shareholders. So that's one thing that I think is worth talking about is when you start an equity-heavy company or a debt-heavy company. And my company was debt-heavy. So we were always stressed, always tossing in every extra penny that we had. But we retained a lot of equity in our company. And I sit on the board of directors for a couple other breweries, and they're equity heavy, and they don't have the same pressures that you have in a debt heavy company, and you would also be a debt heavy, and you'd also be a debt heavy, and
Set up lots of companies.
sure, yeah. So just that totally changes the game. So if you're starting a company and you're content with retaining 51%, and it's a great idea and you can sell it to a ton of people, strongly consider it. Keep your creative control, keep all the control that you need, and get as much money as you can for it. And it totally changes your life, like your life as a person, running that company versus retaining 95%, and which really isn't worth anything, even though it may be on paper or some like half-baked valuation in your first year or two. It's actually not worth anything until it's sold. So really consider that if any of you do get into business and are interested in having investors, which, by the way, Nova Scotia has a really good investor program, equity tax credit program. Yeah, more or less, we brought on shareholders, but it was all friends and family. And we still retained a lot, and we were debt heavy. But that's a really important consideration that we didn't make. We just, it was kind of like a balance for us to say, okay, how do we start? We know we need $1 million. How do we get it? Well, I have this, I have this, I have this. Okay, we can borrow this much. Oh, the rest we need to get from investors. And that's more or less how we did it, which is kind of backwards. We should have had a bit more foresight. But anyway, it's all friends and family, so it's been gravy.
I guess jumping to that point, structuring businesses, everything you say rings true, and there's no one size fits all for how to start your business. I'm not trying to market here, but yeah, these are the things that we run through with clients every single day. How do we do it? How do we set up? How do we fund this? And as I've sort of alluded to, there's lots of interesting options these days. Even outside of the Nova Scotia tax credits, outside of traditional fundraising, lots of experimentational stuff with coin offerings, things like that. So there's a million ways, but how to best do it also is a bit of a tailored solution.
The best thing I did recently for my business was invest in a money coach. And so because I'm a solopreneur, I do have my business bank accounts and my personal bank accounts, but I found they're kind of blurring together a little bit too much. And when things were quieter, I was relying maybe on my business credit card to cover purchase of a new camera or something like that. And then when I get paid, you get paid in big chunks, big sums all at once, and I take that money and pay it all off. And then the cycle of going back and forth is really driving me crazy. So I hired a money coach that specializes in working with small businesses. So I now know exactly how much every 2 weeks that I pay myself. I know exactly where that money is going to all these different savings accounts. And I have money going into a savings account for gear that I know I need to spend $5,000 on every year, whatever that might be. And so that it gave me control over everything. I know exactly what's happening, and then I feel much more confident about it. And when you pay attention to things like that, things that might be like a pain point in your business, if you ignore it, it gets worse. if you give it some attention, if you need to hire someone to help you through that, and then I find you put that positive attention towards it and it starts to resolve itself. So don't be afraid to reach out and ask for help in that case.
Any other questions? Okay, well, I have a question. So we all know that networking is really important. And I was wondering if any of you have any recommendations for networking events that are around that you would suggest that students go to.
There's one that I've been going to for years called Third Wednesday, and it's on the third Wednesday of each month. We're currently at the Foggy Goggle on Gottingen Street, and it's for startups and tech companies, creative companies, anyone who wants to join, really. For me, it's just become a place to catch up with my friends and have a drink. So that's a really great one that I recommend, and we love having students come in. You get a chance to stand up for a minute and introduce yourself and connect with other people who have businesses that are looking to hire people. So I would recommend coming to that one and checking it out.
I've got 2 little kids, so I don't do a lot of networking anymore outside of 9 to 5. But I think what I would recommend on the entrepreneurial front would be, I don't have specific events for this, but keep in tune with what's going on at Volta, which is a startup incubator downtown. I mean, they've got new businesses sprouting up every minute down there. On top of that, I mean, pay attention to what's going on at like Cove Research, look at events that are going on there. I mean, that's all companies that are starting up in the ocean technology space and ways to kind of get more out of the ocean. That's a big initiative that's really starting to make waves here. I would, I mean, things like that. The generally speaking, I mean, it depends on what your interests are. If you're interested in getting out and I don't know if you're a female entrepreneur and you're interested in getting out and meeting with other female entrepreneurs, there's what's the one that Matt O'Reilly puts on?
Leading Ladies.
Leading Ladies, yeah. There's if you're interested in user experience, and in my line of work, there's a user experience group who meet up once a month. Like, I think Take to Twitter is probably my best answer, because there's a group for everything that in the city that gets together. I mean, this is a very vibrant city. I think most groups are probably pretty bad at advertising what it is that they're doing, but if you find them on Twitter, you'll be able to kind of track down what's going on. So, yeah, I don't know much, but I know a bit stuff.
I also don't really participate in networking, but there's this great place on Roby Street called Good Robot where, but seriously, we do have a charity event every Monday night, which is filled with great people. And the only other network that I know of that a lot of my cohorts attend is the Halifax Social Network. Anyway, they have events at our place every now and then, and it seems like a good group of folks. Yeah.
I guess mine's a little less orthodox. It's more of an exercise for you. Think about 3 people in this city who you would like to meet, who you admire, who you think what they're doing is interesting, and Google them. You all have access to the internet. There's no excuses. Everyone's contact information is available. Call them. If people call me, I'm always willing to help them. And you know, the most flattering thing for any person, and maybe I'm speaking for myself here, but if someone calls me and says, Kevin, I'm really interested in what you're doing, I'd like to hear about it, I am certainly going to give that person the time of day. And every time it's happened, I have certainly gone out of my way to help them however I can. You live in a friendly world with friendly people who want to help you. And to be honest, it's extremely flattering, I think, when people reach out and say, look, I want to learn about you and what you do. It's scary. It's not something people are used to doing, just calling strangers and trying to explain why you want to meet with them. But it is, without a doubt, the most effective tactic I have ever used. And I think 3 times now I've rewritten my list of the people because I've met them. And they have introduced me to other people, and it's really been effective for me. Probably the best career building tool I've ever come across. It's allowed me to meet everyone I've wanted to meet in the cannabis industry, a lot of interesting people in the cryptocurrency industry. It's a simple tool. Think about it. 3 people, call them.
I want to jump into that one a bit too. kind of playing off that, I mean, one thing that I will say, and probably speaks well to the room, you're young in your careers, you're going to be looking for your first or next job out of university. I mean, the one thing I will say, if you're planning on sticking around here, and I hate to say this, but it's true, Halifax is all about who you know. Some jobs don't ever get posted. Some jobs do get posted, but there's probably already a short list in mind before it ever is posted. I'm overgeneralizing on that, but to play on what you said, the number of times that someone has reached out to me to say, can I grab a coffee, hoping to pick your brain about the marketing industry, hoping to pick your brain about getting a job. It's not that they're reaching out to me saying, will you hire me? In some cases it is, but more often than not, it's just saying, can you help me? And I am happy as anything to go sit and have a cup of coffee with someone and chat with them and get to know them a bit, get to know what they're looking for, because chances are, we've all met a lot of people in the city over our careers, and we can certainly, after having that conversation, probably point you in a good direction, connect you with the right person. It's not to say that we've got a job guarantee that ever comes with that kind of stuff, or advice guarantee that's going to work out, but I mean, we're always happy to, and I think anyone really that I know in the city is always happy to kind of get together and let you pick their brain, and they'll offer you some advice. I think all of us love to talk, so it's kind of part of it. Yeah.
Questions from anyone else? Okay, I'll ask another one. So in regards to the work that you guys all do, which are quite different, do any of you have a project that you've done or a job that you're like the most proud of in your work?
My passion project is a blog that I started last year called East Coast Food Stories. And I think everybody should have a personal project that they're working on that can relate to the work you're doing or totally outside of it, just to keep your interest going, just to be really excited about something. It's been an amazing way for me to do a lot of creative work where I don't have a client telling me how to do it. It's completely up to me. It's a great way for me to reach out to a chef that I really respect. I might, it's an excuse to reach out to that person and connect with them, and I have something to offer them. So visit, take some photos, do a story about them. It's helping me improve my writing skills, because that's not something I do very often. So this blog is something that I'm really proud of. People seem to really respond to it. Everybody loves food. It's how we connect with other people. It's how we share stories about our history and what we're passionate about. And so I find it's a really great connector, and I've really enjoyed doing it and looking forward to keeping it going.
Sorry, what was the question?
Do you have any projects or jobs that you've worked on that you're the most proud of?
Now, I guess I'm not allowed to speak specifically about clients, as they are my interactions with them are privileged. So I can't really give you concrete and clear examples of things I'm proud of. Every day, I guess I'm very proud to work with a lot of interesting entrepreneurs and new industries. I'm particularly proud of the work I'm doing in the cannabis industry, as I don't want to toot my own horn, but it is groundbreaking both in the world and in Canada. And it's a very new industry that just simply didn't exist. So I'm always very interested in that.
Mine's less of a project and more of a culture. At our company, we don't really believe there is a box that you need to think outside of. There's no box at all. It's any idea that's pitched from any one of our 35 to 30 employees has equal consideration. We have a very broad org chart, so everybody's opinions heard, assessed at the same value, and it's a go or no go, no matter what you do or whatever. So we're all voices are heard. We're working through a project with some DAL MBA students, and that was one thing that they pointed out was a little unique in our industry, and so really proud of that. And the consultant that I had referenced earlier, going through our business plan, had made a bunch of recommendations that were counter to what we felt was right. rather than what may be right from a typical business perspective. So as to suggest that he was referencing chasing profit margins, which is something we don't do. We assess whether something feels right, does right by the community, represents us accurately, and if we make money, great. If we don't, okay, well, we still stuck to our morals. And the interesting thing is that that has paid dividends, being true to our brand, true to ourselves. And then next week we see the 10 people that showed up to that really obscure event that we had come back as regulars because they believe in that we believed in ourselves and we pursued that. And I feel like that's maybe something that's not as prevalent in business these days, but has apparently taken hold in kind of the education world a little bit. I've talked to a few professors from SMU, and they said that now they're teaching social enterprise as a topic in university rather than just a thing that people do out of the goodness of their heart, which is not the case. But anyway, that's my jam.
For me, I don't know. There's lots of projects, but I think for me it tends to be. I almost more get excited about chasing that high, of which is a weird way to put it, but of I don't know, closing a client on a project, finishing a project off. But the odd thing is like all the projects that the team have accomplished and been involved in. Half the time when someone asks me what we've worked on, I don't remember, which makes me sound a bit off. But it's really just because it's sort of chasing, and maybe that's unique to my industry, but it's almost chasing that next big project, that next exciting thing to do. I mean, if someone asks me what my most exciting project is, I'll probably name the last project that we did. And that's not to say it was the biggest or it was the best, but it's still what's kind of running through me at this point. So I don't know. That's a terrible answer, but it's kind of just we're constantly just sort of chasing what's the next awesome thing we want to work on, and when we're in it, we're so in it and we're so invested in it that project or those few projects that we're working on at a given time sort of become our everything. And then when they're done, we're on to the next thing. And it's not that we've completely forgotten about it or that client goes away or that opportunity goes away, but then we're fully, and it goes back to that piece I was saying earlier, and I think similar for your business and your business and probably your business is you kind of have to just, for any opportunity you've got to immerse yourself and learn everything about it, and really for that time, that is everything for you. And then you move on to the next thing, and that becomes everything for you. So, I don't know. Yeah.
Okay, and I have another question. This one's for Ian and Angus. What's the reasoning behind the names of your entrepreneur jobs?
When I started my company, I was not overly thoughtful, and I went to register my business name before I knew my business name, and they said, well, what do you want to call it? I'm like, well, I don't know. So I said Vincent IT Solutions. At the time, I was fixing computers for people. That was my side gig. So Vincent IT Solutions was born, and some point along the way, when we were doing a lot of marketing, people would call and say, can you come fix my computer? And I was like, that's not what we do. And Vincent IT Solutions is a mouthful, so a lot of people just started calling us Bits. So Bits was what we became. And over time, when we sort of evolved from being really then just a web-focused company and really turned more into that full-service creative marketing agency, we shifted ever so slightly to tag creative agency at the end of it. So that's our name.
Cool.
Well, our company, through the 3 years of pre-planning that we worked on, we incorporated terribly early for no real reason besides we thought it was a step in the right direction. And at that time, we called ourselves Rot Iron Brewing Company, so rot as in the old type of iron that a lot of fences are made out of. And rot also means worked. And worked being a past tense, iron being reference to the iron ring. The three of us were engineers, yada, yada, yada. Anyway, so we proceeded with all the design, and we still have growlers that are labeled Wrought Iron Brewing Company, and did all kind of our pre-work and built the brewery. And then we hired a architecture and branding firm, and we said, okay, we need to take the tap room and we need to make your design a little more cohesive with the label that we've been using for the past 3 years. We said, you have carte blanche, just don't touch the name. You can even change the logo if you'd like. So it was like, they had 8 weeks before we opened, and we were kind of in a full press, just trying to get the tap room and the brewery finished. And they came in 6 weeks later with their heads hung and just asked for an open mind for 10 minutes and opened a laptop. And they had a PowerPoint 20 pages long titled "Why You Need to Change Your Name." And they just had a plethora of reasons, which were all great. And then they wanted Adjective Robot Brewing Company, so we spent a weekend ourselves and a few of the designers just going through a list. We had a short list of 40 adjectives. And anyway, we met Monday and we thought good was so simple and funny that a robot can be neither good nor bad, that it's just programmed to do what it does. And anyway, that's the story. It's an architect picked it, basically.
Cool. Any questions from anyone else? No. Is there anything that you guys want to add to the panel that you think we skipped over, maybe?
Anyone out there working on a business plan? That's cool.
I have in the past. Kind of
Anybody have a great idea that they haven't gotten to a business plan phase yet?
Don't be shy, guys.
That's all right.
All right, so we're pretty close to the end of time anyway, just 5 minutes off. So we'll just wrap up our panel. So thanks for coming out and, in our bad weather. And a big thank you to our panelists as well. Yeah, thank you all for coming.